Hi, I'm Dustin Weiniger, out traveling yet again and coming to you today from beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. This video is about guns in movies, and particularly the Western movies, which are probably my favorite type of movie to watch. The other day, I was watching the movie Hostiles starring Christian Bale. It's a Western, and it just came out on DVD about a week or so ago. And it got me thinking about movies that show guns correctly and movies that show guns incorrectly. In other words, movies that show guns being used realistically versus guns that can just do ridiculous things, capable of impossible things. Now, in the movie Hostiles, I was particularly paying attention to the Colt single-action armies that most of the characters in that movie carried, the soldiers. And for the most part, I think Hostiles got it right. Those guns seem to work about like they would in real life. Take a look at this clip. Now, back in those days, they would have been using black powder cartridges, and as you can see, there was a fair amount of smoke, fair amount of recoil, and they even sounded about like my black powder cartridges sound when I go out and use my single-action army. So I appreciate that. Now, right after that, there was another scene that impressed me. I was not able to get this clip, but the woman in the movie, just after the scene you saw, steals one of the soldiers' revolvers from a saddle, and she goes over to one of the natives who had killed her family, and he was dead now, but he starts shooting at him anyway, or she does, excuse me. And she fires 5 times, and on the 6th shot, the gun just goes click, which means the gun was loaded with 5 instead of 6. Cowboy load. And I thought that was a nice detail, that they actually got that in there because that's historically accurate. But one complaint, when she pulls the trigger and the gun goes click, it goes like this. And I thought, well, that's a fair amount of recoil for a gun that didn't fire. And you could argue maybe it was a flinch, but a flinch would usually go forward, not back. But other than that, I thought Hostiles did a great job. Now, some movies show the single-action army not so accurately. Another movie that I found for this video was the movie The Magnificent Seven, in which Denzel Washington carries one of those. Now, you may know that after you fire your shots, the brass cases inside the cylinder expand, which means they will not fall out. So you've got to open the loading gate and then use the ejector to push each case out. But let's see how Denzel Washington unloads his. Well, that sure was slick. I wish I could get this one to work like that, but as you know, that was just entirely far-fetched and not how these guns work. But hey, it's a movie and it's still fun to watch. One more example of the single-action army. This one comes from the movie Open Range, starring Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall, among others. Now, at the end of the movie, minor spoilers here, but there's a big shootout, a climactic shootout, and Kevin Costner is using one of these revolvers. Now, if you don't already know, these were typically loaded with 5 rounds, the cowboy load, but they can hold a maximum of 6 rounds. And I suppose if you knew you were going into a gunfight, you would load all 6 because you're not going to be carrying it for a period of time in a holster. Now, in the movie, the characters played by Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall, they did know they were going into a gunfight, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yes, they should have 6 in their revolvers. Well, let's see how many times Kevin Costner's revolver actually fires without a reload. Now, before I go any further, I should mention I'm really not trying to just bash these movies. These are all movies I enjoy, and this is just for fun. In fact, that scene you just saw, if you saw the whole scene, I actually think that is an excellent scene. One of the most fun shootouts I've ever watched in a Western movie. But being the gun enthusiast that I am, I just can't help notice little details like that. Now, on Open Range, though, I do have to give them credit where credit is due. There's another scene earlier in the movie in which Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall again walk into a saloon, and Kevin Costner's upset because the bartender does not want to serve them whiskey. So he takes out a shotgun and fires it in the bar. And again, back in those days, this was black powder loads. So let's take a look at how that looked inside of a saloon. Now that was excellent. In fact, I would say that just about redeems the earlier scene that I showed you where he fired 13 rounds out of a 6-shot revolver. Now this next clip, I wouldn't say this movie was a Western, but it does take you almost that far back in time. This is from the movie Last Man Standing, starring Bruce Willis. Now in that movie, if you've not seen it, he dual wields throughout the movie a pair of 1911 pistols. And if you're not familiar with the 1911 pistol, particularly the early ones, they were chambered in .45 ACP and had a 7-round magazine. So if he's carrying 2, that's 14 rounds. But let's assume he had a round in each chamber plus full magazine. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say 16 rounds. We'll take a look at this. Now I wasn't counting, but I do think that was probably more than 16. In fact, I'm convinced the only reason those guns ever ran out of ammo is because he ran out of bad guys. Now, this last clip, this is going to be very out of place compared to the others, but I just introduced my kids to this movie. It's a movie I enjoyed back in the 90s, Dumb and Dumber. And you might remember this scene. Harry and Lloyd are in a room with Mary Swanson, I believe the character's name was, and Harry has just been shot by the villain. And of course, he was wearing a bulletproof vest, unbeknownst to the villain and Jim Carrey at the time. But then the villain turns to Jim Carrey. Let's take a look at this.
If it's any consolation, you're about to be reunited.
I don't know about you, but I don't think that gun looks very intimidating when it's already run empty and the slide's locked open. Now, here's the point of today's video. I want to hear some of your favorite examples of movies that show guns being portrayed correctly and movies that show guns being portrayed incorrectly. So I'd like to have some interaction here in the comments down below. I've just showed you some examples that came to my mind. So what are yours? Go ahead and list them, and we can maybe have some discussion down in the comments about them, and maybe you'll remind me of movies I didn't even think of for this. Well, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe this one wasn't so helpful as some of them are, but I'll have some more coming out soon. Don't forget to click the like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos. And thank you so much, as always, for watching.